Now this is a big change up from how Kang was in the comics, with the Victor Timely persona even being changed slightly too. In those, Nathaniel Richards was born during the 31st century, and he basically lived in a peaceful utopia. Finding it more boring than a heavy spoilers video, he decided to travel back in time and conquer Earth using the technology from his civilization. Now, during one of his many defeats, Kang ended up going back in time to the 1st of January 1901. Founding the town of Timely, Wisconsin, he then became the mayor and built a corporate empire up around himself. Creating Timely Industries, this allowed him to integrate into all forms of technology, including the automotive field. However, he also started dabbling in robotics and even built life model decoys that would carry out tasks while he was away. These aged as well, and Timely was able to come back and pretend to be Victor's son so he could continue operating. Now, if you're a fan of the old school comics, then you'll probably know that the original Human Torch was an android, and Timely was retconned into having a hand in making this. He also provided security down the line for Avengers Tower, which could be what the Kang building and the Void had links to. Anyway, what we get here is a vast departure, with Timely being a child of the 1800s. I know that this is definitely played across like one of his many origin stories, but technically this is the sacred timeline, so it's where either He Who Remains is from or one of his main variants. Potentially He Who Remains may have even killed Victor and then taken over his timeline while cutting down the others. We've never heard any version of Kang confirm if their name's Nathaniel yet, and potentially, when we do, that will be the true version of Kang. Now, if this isn't He Who Remains, then why would he choose to live in a timeline that he doesn't belong to? Well, it's something that we saw Cap do with Peggy, if you follow how the Russos interpret Endgame, and this may have been a timeline where the best decisions were made. Man could have ended up in the Morbius universe, but instead he's out here looking after Mobius. Now what we see playing out is the literal definition of the bootstrap paradox, with it showing us the theory behind it in live action. When talking about time travel, you often get lots of different situations where you could go over how certain things would work if they were actually real. For example, the most famous one's the grandfather paradox, in which you'd be unable to go back in time and kill your granddad because if you did, then you'd never be born. Therefore, you couldn't go back in time and kill him, hence why it's classed as being a paradox. Now when it comes to the bootstrap paradox, that lays out the groundwork by imagining a scientist who one day gets a knock at the door. Upon opening it up, he finds a book there which clearly lines out how to build a time machine. The scientist then uses this and travels back in time, knocks on his own door, and then leaves himself the book. Also, huge shout outs to the channel Smart by Design. I've used this animation on countless breakdowns when I was talking about Dark and stuff, and I've never given them a shout out because I'm a piece of shit. So apologies for that, but yeah, this always comes in useful. Now there are theories that the book would decay and fall apart over time, as that's the thing that's remaining consistent. I've never really found out why it's classed as a paradox though, and I thought that it might be down to that. However, it could also be a chicken and egg situation where it can't happen first if we view time in a linear fashion. In order for it to operate, time has to be cyclical and exist all at once as part of a big block. Now what we're witnessing with He Who Remains is him very much creating his own origins in his death. At the end of time, once Loki and Sylvie arrive, he then sends Ravonna back to give himself the TVA manual. This then allows him to walk the path where he'd become He Who Remains, who then tells Ravonna to go and give himself the book. It's a bit of a head fuck, but it's the bootstrap paradox playing out over thousands of years and creating a sort of Ouroboros cycle playing into the themes of the season. Kang's new origins somewhat based on this as well, with it being updated in Only Myself Left to Conquer. That saw young Nathaniel going back in time and then bumping into his older self, who then started to train him. Killing Nathaniel's first love, this pitted the two in a war across time in which Nathaniel battled versions of Kang throughout most of history. Now in the end, he became a bitter old man that journeyed back to the spot where he first met Kang. Here he encountered a younger version of himself, and we watched as the cycle then played out again. You also have this sort of being based around the lesser known time travel novel by H.G. Wells, which was called The Chronic Argonauts. Released in 1888, this short story sees a time traveller creating a loop like what we get here.